This is a public information film. Airgun collectors, know your fake pellet boxes. Something that really complements a nice vintage cased air pistol is an original vintage pellet box. Now these days there are quite a large selection of reproduction vintage pellet boxes you can buy, and they look really close to the real thing. Could you tell the difference? So the box on the right is a reproduction, and this is a reproduction of a improved Bulldog pellet box which were originally made in the 1930s, but this one was made about a year ago and it cost £8. On the left is an original box. This was made nearly 100 years ago and is worth about £80. Now obviously they do look very similar, but there are a couple of differences. So all you need for this test is an ultraviolet light. I'm using a little UV torch, and what this is going to check for is what age the paper is. So John Griffiths told us that in the 1950s they started to add a chemical to paper that made it brighter, made the whites whiter and made the colour stand out more. And this is because it reflects back ultraviolet light, which is a natural light, sunlight, etc. And they only started doing this in the 1950s, and by the 1960s all paper and all card that was manufactured had this brightening chemical in it. So if your pellet box was made before the 1950s and 60s, it won't show up bright under a UV light and you'll know it's an authentic original pellet box. But if the whites shine up under a UV light, then it was made after 1965. Now any boxes that were made after then will shine up bright, but that doesn't mean that they're reproductions. So this Milbro Hollow Slugs box, which shines up bright, was made up until the 1980s, so that doesn't necessarily mean that's a repro. This UV test should also work with documents, so any vintage catalogues or vintage manuals that were made before 1950 shouldn't glow up when they're under a UV light. Now unfortunately this type of test won't work that well in somewhere like an arms fair because it will be too well lit. You really need to get it into a dark room and then that brightness will really show up under the UV light. Now these are some examples of pellet boxes that are currently available as reproductions, but if they are genuine then they shouldn't shine up under a UV light because they were made before the 1950s. I think it's a really good way of checking whether your pre-1950s pellet box is genuine or a reproduction. Reproductions aren't a bad thing, but if they get into circulation and people don't know if they're reproductions anymore, I don't think that's that useful. So this is a really good way of checking. Thanks to John Griffiths for letting us know about it. Yeah, Dario's already checked his entire collection and he was quite relieved to find out that they're all legit. So yeah, very useful. So I hope you found that interesting. If you did, please give it a like and subscribe if you want to see more. See you on the next one.